Hello and welcome to season 5, episode 5 of Dualistic Unity. I am enjoying the exploration of what is real. I think for a lot of us, for a lot of our life, we run around wondering, what's real? Why is this happening? What's going on? And as you start to continue through that without settling upon a specific conceptual idea of what all this is pointing to, you start to see more and more and more what is real and recognize that maybe it's not something you can point to, but something that you can explore and move through. And so that's been what I've really been enjoying in something like this, doing a Q&A episode. It's not to say that we have answers, but we're just continuing to explore and weigh different questions, considerations, and seeing what comes up, because it's not about getting to a spot. It's just recognizing that you're always in that spot and continuing to step through yourself. And curiosity certainly informs the continued exploration of that. Once you realize that there isn't a spot that you get to, because you're always in it.
And so this really isn't a Q&A episode so much as a Q episode, because any A that we happen to impart should turn into further Qs. All answers should be doorways to further questions, because that's where you find more and more and more of what is, or at least the recognition of what always has been, which of course is more and more of you and your existence and your awareness and all of the words that we use for all of that. So again, this episode is mostly going to be Qs. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. We haven't done actually one of these Q&A episodes since season 2, I believe. We do community topics, and so that kind of took the place of the Q&A episodes for a little while. But the community topics are a bit different in that we really do get to focus in on one subject specifically. So if anybody would like to check out any of the community topics, do so. There are a lot, going from artificial intelligence to the Freemasons to a bunch of other things. Do check those out. But this Q&A episode is more or less just on the fly, questions as they come up. Andrew has gathered a bunch of questions from Instagram. Of course, we're doing this live because why not? We don't prepare ever. So we figured, why not record this live? And while we're doing so, if you have questions that you would like to add to this episode, please do so in the comment section on either Twitch or YouTube. We will receive both of those comments, and then you will add to the overall scope of whatever the hell it is we're going to cover here.
Hell yeah. I'm excited for it. Yeah, for our Q episode. I just start calling it that. Like, what the fuck are they talking about? So yeah, I mean, should we just get into it?
Fuck it, let her rip.
Let's do it. I might as well just go through these kind of in order. Is ambition necessary?
Well, that's a good one, isn't it? That's great. I guess it really depends on what we mean by ambition. What are we talking about there? Are we talking about the desire to be more? Are we talking about the desire to prove oneself? Are we talking about the desire to acquire more value? Because I would say that in itself is usually what we take as ambition. But there is a degree of toxicity and need in that ambition. So I don't know if you could classify that necessarily as ambition or escapism.
Yeah, because the question always comes down to, where is it coming from? You ask a question like, oh, is ambition necessary? This is not a yes or a no answer. And this is why these are aptly called Q episodes than not Q&As, because like there is just so many considerations in a statement like this. Like the ambition for what, to become what, to do what, to like, where is the drive for it coming from? Because, and I talked about this a little bit this morning, just how I'm realizing more and more that from the perspective of this being more dreamlike, your priorities, your perception of what's happening shifts, your desires to do certain things shift, and the focus comes back to just the experience that you're having, the fullness of that experience. And so ambition can oftentimes be taken to a point that it takes away from your experience here and now. Like, what is the ultimate goal of the ambition? Like, what is it being done for? Is it being done to build an illusion of yourself that you keep investing in and that keeps hindering you from experiencing the fullness of being here now? So it's not so much of whether or not it's necessary, but why are you doing it? And if you understand that you don't have to build this idea of yourself, you don't have to become anything more. You can't become anything more. Even just the false attachment to the idea that you could become more is ridiculous. Like it isn't something. It's something that's rooted in a confusion about what you actually are. And so in order to continue stepping through reality, continue paying attention, continue to do, just be reality and explore it, like there isn't ambition that's necessary. I guess the only ambition, which I doubt is the way that this was asked, is to be ambitious towards being attentive, which isn't ambition because it isn't something there isn't a secondary motive. Like being ambitious almost immediately brings into play this, I'm here and I want to get there. There's nowhere else to get. So it's just, I'm not paying attention. I want to pay more attention. So it's like, then pay more attention, fucker. Like that can be done right now. Like that ambition to be more attentive to your experience almost immediately takes away from the ability to be attentive to the experience, because like I'm going to be attentive to the experience. Like attention is something that happens immediately. So while being ambitious towards something, it kind of creates this perception of a journey, of a path, of you being in another spot eventually. And there is never that. And so the ambition to be attentive, ambition isn't necessary because it happens immediately. It's not something that you get to a spot where, oh, I'm now more attentive than I was. Like in that moment, as you're saying that, you're not being attentive to what is. And so the ultimate recognition of that doesn't require any ambition. And I think it's important to ask yourself a lot of questions if you're being driven by ambition to get to a certain spot. How are you perceiving yourself right now that's causing you to think that you have to be in any other spot?
See, and that's kind of funny because I've often kind of tongue-in-cheek claimed to have lofty ambitions. And what I mean by that specifically, because I don't mean ambition towards a certain end result, because I don't have any need. Like there's no sense of lack that I'm trying to satisfy. And so to me, the ambition is just here now as much as I can be. But that said, being here now, not go somewhere, but become something. The now consistently changes. There is, in fact, and forgive the expression, a future, but that future is still now. And so all of the things that I'm doing now go in a direction, not any one direction so much as just they become more changed. It becomes more of what it is, and it adapts according to what I put my attention into and whatnot. So knowing that, in fact, the trajectory of my path, quote unquote path, is really determined by how involved I am with each step. I know that the level of involvement with each step yields different results. And so to me, there's no ceiling, as it were. And we've talked about this in terms of dualistic unity. And Andrew, when you and I first met, I know there was a period of time where we started talking about all the shit that I would love to see happen. And you kind of went like, whoa, that's a lot of shit. And we've been talking about it ever since. None of that's passed. It's just that I don't need for any of it to happen. See, it's just that as there's no ceiling, it's just, oh, look, the next doors. Oh, the next doors. Oh, the next doors, the next doors. And each option of doors open up new possibilities. I don't know where that goes. And I'm not willing to say that there's somewhere it can't go. because I don't need it to go any specific direction. I know it's the quality of the step that determines the efficacy of each and every part of the journey, right? So I just focus on the door, and all of my ambition goes into walking through doors, stopping, admiring the door, enjoying the door, learning from the door, going on to the next fucking door. And that's my only ambition. Is that an ambition that brings me any kind of wholeness or completeness? No, but it is an exercise in how whole and complete I am right now, which is why there's no ceiling.
Exactly. Like it's just what plays out. It's like the action of what, just being what you are when you recognize more and more clearly what you are. It's not that there's an active push, but there's just nothing pulling away from that. Like being able to see that, oh, there are so many potential possibilities, and nothing, when there isn't anything in the background saying like, oh, that's not possible. No, you can't do that. No, that's not something that's feasible. Come on, be realistic now. Like without all of that, it's just the continued stepping through. And so ambition is just a product of not holding yourself back from the things, as opposed to, I gotta get here because it's going to make me more. It's just when the weight is dropped, like, all right, let's go keep exploring, with no exact thing that you need to get out of it by any means. It's just the exploration of yourself without so much holding you back anymore, basically. So.
Exactly. Which is why we have talked about everything from a Dualistic Unity DAO and its own NFTs and cryptocurrency as a means of enabling resources and putting resources into similarly minded projects in terms of helping along the more unifying mentality, as it were, promoting that, because we know there's not a lot of profit in that. We've also talked about retreat center, an actual full-time year-round retreat center. We've talked about cannabis cultivation. We talked to Amanda about different resources and ways that we can get involved with community projects. We've talked to a lot of people. We talked to Marie about alternative schooling for children. We've talked to a lot of people about a lot of different options. And that's the whole thing. For me, it's all possible. May not be possible right now, but let's just keep walking through doors, and maybe one of them will be that door. And I'll never say that it's not going to happen, because I spent my whole life saying what's possible and what's not. And all it did was limit me down to a bunch of smaller options when I could have been doing all kinds of stuff. This is why it's impressive when you watch, like Mr. Beast, for example, and Justin Bieber, even, for example. Kid just was singing songs to his grandparents, right? All of a sudden, bang. Because things happen. Who are you to say it can't happen? Who are you to say that it's not possible? All you're saying is what you assume is possible, and that's limiting what might actually happen. So don't do that. Just focus on the door in front of you and let whatever doors come next, right? There's a great deal of freedom and potential in that.
Exactly. All right. You ready for another question?
You know it.
Yeah, this is just, this could go anywhere. But where did you gain the insights you teach?
I didn't. I haven't gained or accumulated any insights whatsoever. Any insight that I've ever gained or accumulated, I immediately try to question, because it's dead, it's stagnant. As soon as it's something I'm holding on to as truth. So I would say that the insights, whatever they might be, that we express from time to time, are here now. And they come from the process of getting out of the way of the narrative that blocks us from the very obvious fact of what is. And that's it. That's all we're ever expressing, is the ongoing experience of our deepening awareness of what is. Otherwise, we'd be referring to a dead concept that, unfortunately, while it might be intellectually useful, doesn't have the same feeling. Doesn't come from that place of passion or enthusiasm or fire or curiosity, or the redefinition of ambition we gave previously. Right. And that's very much it.
Yeah, it's as if the insights are a product of the experience that you're having of not holding on to so many things. And so, because it's like the insights come from the state of freedom that you embody. And so if those insights start coming and you start grabbing them and holding on, it's like, that's not making any space for any new or fresh or living insights, or at least closer to living. Because the longer you hold on, the deader it gets, just like fucking disintegrates into stuff. And we've, as a society, we've been holding on to shit for way too long, and that shit is dead as fuck now. But we keep doing it because it's uncomfortable to wonder if, oh shit, this thing is dead. Maybe are there any alive ones? Where are the fresh ones? It's like they're here now, and you're hindering their ability to be recognized because you keep holding on to those. And so that whole mentality of holding on to insights, gaining insights, adding insights, teaching insights, like even that is fucking hilarious when you recognize that as soon as it's held on to, it's dead. So we have an insight, and it's like it's no longer the thing that it came from, and it's still beneficial to share and express and whatnot to a point, but then we create all of these things. It's like there's a fresh insight, and then it's this whole system and teaching and books and everything around it. And it's like, oh, Jesus Christ, it turns it into this whole thing that it isn't. And then people start seeing, the system, the book, everything that was expressed from that fresh soil that the insight came from, and then they start picking at those, and they're like, oh, let me hold on to that, let me attach to that, and that whole, and then attach to that so that it means something about me, and this makes me what I am. And so we're using fucking dead shit to add to ourself, just slapping on all this dead shit, thinking that it means something about me because it allows us to feel better about ourselves. And so anyway, where do you gain the insights that you teach? There is nothing being taught. If anything, it's like a mentality being embodied that insights stem from, but it isn't something that's grasped and held on to and then taught. Because especially once, even if you're attaching to it and then you're teaching it to someone else, like it's even further from the reality of where that came from. So if anything, it's just embodying that spot that allows the insights to arise, which does not include holding on to insights, because as you hold on to them, it hinders the ability for insights to arise. But we do that because the uncertainty of not being able to come up with some conceptual idea of ourselves is uncomfortable. And so we hold on to things that aren't it and just convince ourselves that they are. And because so many people are doing it, we think that that's the only way we can.
I find it kind of funny, actually, thinking about it, that we call them insights. and we're all like, oh, they're insights. It's like, actually, they're kind of just obvious. You're not what you think. Oh, yeah. Reality is not what you think. Oh, yeah. There's only the present moment. Right. Those aren't insights. This isn't some groundbreaking truth. This is shit that your 2-year-old knows. Right? Like this is it. It's just they can't communicate it, right? But that's the experience that they're having. It's just that we get so lost in concept. We get so lost in illusion that just talking about what is seems like it's revolutionary. Right? And I find that funny. We're like, it's insight. It's like, no, it's just the uncertainty that's always been there. And I guess that's what we're saying. That's where these quote unquote insights come from, is the experience of that uncertainty, the embracing of that uncertainty, the expression and communication of the experience of that uncertainty. And that's really it. When it's in the moment, you can feel that it's in the moment. And you don't even have to be talking about it. You don't have to be talking about uncertainty or God or unity or any of that shit. Just know it. And when somebody comes up to you and they're judgmental and they're afraid and they're feeling insecure, don't be rattled by it. Don't be pulled or pushed by it. Look at it for what it is and actually act with empathy, not with what you think empathy should be, right? But that means just being what is, having faith in what you are, not the idea. So all of these insights are, again, they're just common fucking sense. And then what happens is we apply the insight, and then we get another layer of awareness as to what we're actually looking at. We're like, oh, wow. And then we come back to the insight of like, it really is just here and now. But now we've got a bunch of other reasons to take that in. And then we take it in a bit deeper. And then there's even more reasons to take that in. And that's what we say, like the insights, quote unquote, insights are always the same, but they're always peeling away another layer of illusion, which is the point. The only thing that's changing is how much you are aware of the illusion. So that way it slips away and you can see past it. And that's what you try to communicate in what we call insight. When you get attached to it, though, you're just making it another layer. Again, it's like you get stuck. You're peeling away the layers, and each one looks a little bit different. And finally, you get to one layer, and you're just like, "Yep, that looks like freedom." And you just stop. And then you look, or you turn around and look at everyone and go, "I found freedom," and you point at it, and then that's where you stop, right? And that's the whole point. It's freedom's the process. Freedom is the process of understanding those layers aren't real. Right? It doesn't matter if they're there. It's the act of letting them go that it feels so free.
Exactly, because it's that attachment that hinders the expression of the experience that it's fucking pointing to and all what it all means. But yeah, with insight, even in the word, it's like sight in to yourself, and like the more clearly you recognize that you're always just looking inward, whether you're perceiving it as inward or outward, it's like that's where the insights lie. But then as you start to attach to them and think it means something about you, it's like you're no longer having that sight into your mind, into your experience, because you're perceiving yourself as separate from everything else that you're looking at. And so yeah, it's like a product of the recognition that you're always just looking at yourself, interacting with yourself. There's an infinite depth to every experience that you ever possibly have. And in that, there is the recognition of all different sorts of insights. But yeah, it's funny how it's usually the most obvious shit that we just have so much garbage in the way of that we don't see it all the time.
Or an investment in not seeing, right? Like we want to assume that the person that we're looking at is thinking the things that we're thinking they think. Like we really want to believe that we're being judged. We have a vested interest in doing so because there's something being played out there. So when somebody comes up to us and he goes, well, actually, you don't really know what they're thinking. You'll hear it sometimes. Yes, I do. Like there's an absolute conviction. Why? Well, because there's a vested interest in that conviction. Right. And all you're doing is coming over and going, yeah, but that's questionable. And it really comes down to whether or not we're willing to let it be questionable. That's all it comes down to. It's very funny when once you understand, like, right, we can do this to ourselves. And we really can. It's part of being limitless. Now, before we move on to your next question, we do have a comment section because we're recording this live, of course. And we do have a question in there as well. So I'm going to mix it up because I want to encourage the comment section to ask more questions. That's a hint for everybody watching. How do you feel about working with scientists to get this viewpoint into mainstream education? I think it's a fantastic idea. I actually think it's the reason that Dualistic Unity, thanks to Amanda, who everybody here is aware of, is now involved with the Global Consciousness Project. And if you don't know what the Global Consciousness Project is, go and check it out. It's been around for like 20 years. It's really, really interesting. At the end of the day, there's a bunch of, there are a bunch of theories that could be fleshed out within this project, specifically talking about how awareness changes our physical reality collectively and individually. We have the potential to get a random number generator, actually one of their newer kinds, where we are going to be able to possibly look into whether or not there is a difference between the observer and the observed in these conversations as our states of awareness expand. What happens to those random numbers? Do they become more or less random? This is something that just before 9/11, numerous different random number generators around the world, they became collectively less random, as though there was something that awareness itself was coming to terms with in terms of 9/11 happening. There's been a couple of other events like that, group meditations, same kind of thing. And so this is something that we are trying to get involved with to the best of our ability. Obviously, there's other science that we'd like to be involved with. Obviously, there are other theories, there are other schools, there are other projects that we would love to be involved with. I'm talking about psychedelics and a bunch of other things. So this is something that will happen over time. I think the problem is that, to be honest, this conversation in terms of awareness, reality, whatever the concept of God is pointing to, our existence, is occasionally either grossly intellectual or absurdly spiritual, looked at as almost being hokey. And so one of the biggest challenges in my life has been avoiding the woo, avoiding all of that stuff. Like, really, as soon as you start making it like, oh, you got to believe this and that, you start losing interest. You really do, in anybody who wants to have a serious conversation. And so I think that that's been collectively what dualistic unity is all about. Getting the woo out of the way, getting the belief out of the way. Anything that we're saying is possible, we're breaking it down in terms of it not being impossible. We're talking about the fact that there are considerations to how limitless reality might be. We're never saying take it on faith, take it on blind faith. It's written in a book somewhere. We're never saying that. And so we're trying to add some credibility to this discussion, so that way the discussion can become more than just something to believe in or identify with, but can actually start to have an impact on mainstream science. Because mainstream science, regardless of what we might be talking about in terms of spirituality, is wrestling with the big problem of consciousness. Right? Where does it come from? Why does it continue to pop up? Why does it express itself as it should? Where is it located in all of this? How do plants fucking have it? Like, there is a big question in science, and it's not something that we can address. It's the reason, the double slit experiment is so mind-blowing. Right? Or the Nobel Prize in Science last year for a non-local universe. What? Like, and we did a community topics on that. Go and check it out. The point is that there are a lot of questions that aren't being asked only because the scientists themselves are still under the preconception that they are human, that they are separate from reality, despite knowing there is no separation between the observed and the observer. You can know that conceptually, but if you're still committed to your idea of yourself as truth, you see that division as reality, regardless of what you might know conceptually. And so the question is, are there scientists who know about their ego and the influence that it has? Are they able to see past it and actually ask questions as the whole rather than as an individual scientist?
And I am excited to find out if there are those willing to do so. And yeah, we're gonna find out and more as we continue on whatever the fuck this is that's happening right now. But I think with the avoidance of the woo, or keeping things coming back to what's real, it's like when you do recognize that the only thing you can say with certainty is that you are here now, that you exist here and now. That's the extent of it. There isn't so much because that's it. Like, that's the only thing you can be certain about. Like, everything, all of the potential, there isn't something telling you that it couldn't possibly be. But as you maintain an idea of things beyond that being definitely certain, there are things that don't fit that seem absurd. And so because we come back so often to just what is real, like your experience here now is all that you know. It's the only thing you can confirm with any degree of certainty. And so if you get caught in, the woo or the potential, or, maybe this is possible, maybe that is possible. But as that becomes your priority, here now is no longer your priority. As that becomes your focus, here now is no longer your focus. And all of those things are a product of this being your focus, of not being distracted by so many things. And so then the things that seem just absurd, like the telekinesis, teleportation, all that sort of stuff that we've discounted, comes back into play as a potential. But if that becomes, your reason for doing it, it's like, oh, I'm just going to recognize that I'm here now so I can teleport. And it's like, yeah, no. Don't do that. Cause that's not, cause it's still attaching to, I am someone who can do this. It's still trying to build some idea of yourself. And so as the woo stuff gets focused on, it kind of destroys itself from within, in a sense. And so that's why we do so often just come back to what is real, because it's like there's a sort of, and I don't want to say like portal or door or whatever, but through sitting in that and continuing to sit in that uncertainty, it's like other things open up that you can't see unless you're willing to sit in that uncertainty and stay there, even when you start seeing things differently. Because you're sitting in it. If you're sitting in it and you start seeing things differently, you start recognizing the potential of what could be possible. And you start seeing all these like shiny things that, if I could do that, that would mean so much about me. Then you're not, it's like it sucks you out of all of it and back into this spot where it isn't a possibility. And so there's like this sort of fine line of maintaining just that priority of being where you're at. Because as soon as everything else comes into play, it all kind of falls apart very quickly. And then you're like trying to hold on. It's almost like, I'm thinking of, for whatever reason, just like Star Wars is coming up, and it's like the light side versus the dark side of the Force. Like as those potentials come into play, like with Anakin, like coming from the light side, he's starting to recognize more and more and more, starting to see the potential. And then he's like trying to get to it, trying to grab onto it, trying to gain eternal life for him, for his attachments to what he is caught up in himself. And it distorts all of it, because it's now coming from a very egotistical, divided mentality, despite recognizing the potential, because now it means something about you. And so I don't even remember where this rant started out. Oh, the science, bringing it to science. So I'm not going to try and wrap this up. I'm just going to pass it.
I'm just stoked that this went towards Star Wars. Fuck yeah. At the end, right? Because it's a great story. I just wanted to mention, and I think this is really funny, it's an exciting time to live in. And it really is, because there's a point where if you had said there are multiple dimensions where, universes of all kinds exist, people would have looked at you and went, shut up, you hippie. Right? Now they'll be like, well, we have this James Webb telescope, and based on, the readings that we're getting and some of the math we're doing, there are possibly a multiverse out there, universes where time goes backwards, universes where time is totally different, where the laws of physics has totally changed, and nobody calls them crazy, because, they've put the calculations into the computer. But they'll tell you like, oh yeah, it only really works in the computer, right? Because we can't actually do any of these things. But the point is, they're saying it's possible. Well, what's the difference between them saying it's possible versus somebody looking at awareness 1,000 years ago and recognizing that all things are possible within awareness and being called an oracle or something? Well, the difference is credibility at the end of the day. And the fact is that people wouldn't understand where that was coming from, where people now feel like that something that is explainable. And so we're making the limitless almost irrefutable by doing so much testing that we're just like, yeah, we don't know why it's happening, but we know there's a lot of it, almost infinite amounts of it, if not infinite amounts of it. And we keep looking at it, but that's kind of it. We don't know why it is doing what it's doing, but there seems to be a lot of it, and it goes on forever. And that's science in a nutshell. Now we're just trying to figure out how to work within that. But at the end of the day, it's the same uncertainty. It's just now we're capable of accepting that uncertainty because it sounds scientific.
Exactly. And as long as you maintain that, just like continue exploring, don't have to settle on something, don't have to get to an answer. Like you can keep going through. It's like our desire for the answer hinders our ability to continue exploring. As always, we are always saying that, like, don't settle, but it really is that, because most of the time when people are exploring, it's to get to an answer, and that cuts them off from the fullness of the exploration. Like, what if the exploration is the answer? We're exploring, trying to get to an answer. It's like the exploration itself is it. So we're like standing on the answer, running through the answer, doing the answer, literally experiencing the answer while we're looking for The answer. Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh,
Dog chasing its tail. Said it before.
Yeah. Oh my God. Like standing on an island in the middle of the ocean, looking for the island, not realizing that you're standing on it. Like, hey.
Yep.
Funny.
That's why you have to laugh in an absent-minded way. Oh, there's my glasses. That kind of thing. All right. Well, that was a hell of a question that spawned a fucking great amount of insight and good conversation. Thank you for the person who asked that. Next one's yours.
All right. This one is not necessarily a question, but can be taken as a question. It just says origin story in parentheses. I'm new. So that could be taken in any direction of anything, whether it's origin of reality, origin of me, origin of dualistic unity, which technically is all the same thing. So I don't know if you have a particular origin story you would like to tell, but feel free.
I have so many different directions I kind of want to go with this. Like, the Big Bang happened, life came into being, and then there was a podcast.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking is like, yeah, we could, fuck it. We'll just go back to all of it. It's all, there has been no division since that point or whatever point. And so this this fucking episode right now is a product of billions of years of evolution.
Yet not.
Exactly.
And yet this one moment of this podcast and every moment that exists going through it exists in eternity as a potential moment that could possibly exist for a limitless being that is everything. It's funny when you really break it down that way, right? When you go, okay, you're a limitless being, you could be anything, but there's nothing but you. So even to have an experience of being something, you also have to be your environment. And that is all of reality. Every variation of that. You as the thing within an environment that is also you. Because there is nothing else that could be. Because that's existence. Existence always is, and it always is potentially everything that could be existence. And it's always you, here and now. That's the perspective. All of it just changes. So every moment of that will always exist. Every moment. The moment you were born and the moment you're in right now exist forever. You will always be having that experience of being born. You will always be having that experience of your first kiss. You will always be having that experience of taking a dump. You will always be having each and every experience you've ever had and every experience you could possibly ever have as anyone, anywhere, ever. And you'll have them forever. The beautiful part is you don't have to experience it that way. You get to experience it one at a time in what looks like an order. And that is the gift.
Whew, all righty. I'm like, yeah, a lot of things going on in my head right now, but it's funny because you start to see the infinite potential in each and every moment, and you like gain a really, really nice appreciation for how incredible it is that there is the perception of a sequence of events, even that ability to go from experience to experience is fascinating because origin story, like we can go through telling stories all day about where things came from and whatnot, but it all exists in potential. I think this is a way better way to take this question, because even going through this episode, we could have gone in any order of any questions, and we do go through every order of questions. We do respond in every single possible way. We do feel every emotion as we're saying all the things, but we experience each of those as if we're not experiencing all of them all at once. And so recognizing that in the potential of it, like, holy fuck, that's a lot. Like, would I even be able, and this is what gets me sometimes, like, would I even be able to perceive and experience if I were experiencing all of them at once, like all of the potential at once, because that then spans out and there's no edge to that of the infinite potential of what could be experienced in terms of what you say, how you feel, responses you get, like the whatever it may be. I'm realizing, like, oh fuck, I'm realizing, like, as I'm talking right now, how much is in potential in everything. And because we are doing all of it right now, we are experiencing everything right now. And so I'm sitting here saying how, oh, it'd be a lot to experience all of that right now. And the reality is that I am right now doing all of that. And I have the ability to feel like I'm not, which is incredible. And then I feel certain things and settle upon a reason why I'm feeling that over something else, as if there's even a specific thing that I'm feeling or experiencing, which isn't, like, we're always trying to translate the experience into meaning something about a thing that we think we are, almost because we have to, in a sense, like almost because it comes with the territory of thinking that I'm only experiencing one thing when I'm not.
Because that experience couldn't exist otherwise. See, that's the thing. The experience of just doing one thing requires you to not have the experience of doing everything else. That's what we are. The experience of doing one thing amongst everything that we're doing. It's just the experience that gets overwhelming, right? We're just like, right, I'm just this one thing. It's like, no, this is just one of the experiences. It just seems really real because it's an experience. It has to.
Right. Because you're not experiencing everything right now. It's just, we've gotten so invested in, this is all I'm experiencing, this is me, this is what I am. And so then, oh, that means that I'm going to end at some point. Oh boy, that means all of this. Oh boy, that means all of this. And that's the eternal life. There is the recognition that you are everything, doing everything, always, forever. And just the more deeply we invest in, well, no, this is all I am because this is all I'm experiencing. And it's like, just because this is the extent of what you think you are doesn't mean it's the case. Just because you think that it is so doesn't mean that so it is. Like, doesn't mean that. And so that's where all the repercussions of the overinvestment in that come from. And, you know, that belief, that fear of death comes up from something that isn't you, just because you're so convinced that it is. Like,
Absolutely. We could be here all day. We're not even getting into the fun part for me, which is the seamlessness of other people. That experience just trips me right the fuck out because they're all having the same experience that I am of being everything that is, but only in one experience. And yet their experience is perfectly seamless to what I'm going through, in the same way that they're playing out the part according to what I'm dealing with. I'm playing the part according to what they're dealing with, because it's perfectly seamless. We're both the same awareness, right? Going through different experiences of that awareness. And yet we both interact with each other totally unaware of the fact that we're the same awareness. And I love that, because it's obvious, again, when you break it down. And somebody was asking me this the other day. It's like, well, if I'm talking to you, you're hearing me. It's like, no, I'm hearing my experience of you. I'm in the way, see? Because I'm the only thing I can experience. I can't experience you. I can't experience you in the same way you can't experience me. And the reason is because there is no you in me.
yeah. Because I'm always running into myself, always interacting with myself, always talking to myself, and how much I invest in the idea that I'm not determines everything that comes with that experience. Like all of the concern, fear, worry, anger, frustration, all of that comes up, but it's part of it too, because it's like you can't dip your toe into the water and not feel the water. Like in order to feel it, you have to dip your toe. And in order to dip your toe, you have to feel it. And so like, it's just, yeah, it's like it comes with the territory to a degree until it doesn't, I guess. But yeah, it's, oh man. Yeah. The seamlessness of other people and the interactions and all of it, like not recognizing itself is like it's so mind blowing. It's so fucking crazy. But
it's kind of like one of my organs not recognizing it was part of the rest of the body. Right. And that's it. Like at first we're just like, Jesus, that's a lot to wrap my mind around, that I'm everyone all at once. It's like, it's not though. You're doing it all the time right now. You've got billions of individual cells within you, all of which are having their own experience, and you're all of them. It's not like you're having a difficult time wrapping your mind around this. And why not? Because you identify as the all of them. And so you're just like, yeah, that makes sense. And it does. You're just like, right. And the more you let go and you are body aware and with your body, the better your body tends to work, right? Look at what's happening on the planet. What is that indicative of other than somebody who's not paying attention to their own body? Look at the way we're living. Look at all the quote unquote junk food we're investing in. And we actually mean junk at this point, right? Because we're not separate. The earth is a part of our body. You know, mind you can go larger than that, but let's just focus on the earth since we're not paying attention to that right now. Right. But the point is it's the same thing. We're all one body. We're all cells within the same awareness that calls itself I. Right. But we don't look at it that way. And so we don't work that way. That's all it is. You know, and we are literally embodying cancer, right, in our mentality, because we're acting the same way that cancer does, out of alignment with the rest of the body, not serving its purpose, doubling, growing, constantly feeding on more of it, on more for itself, and eventually hurting the entire organism. And that's what we're doing, just out of selfishness, because we can't recognize that we are not separate from everything else. Right? We're not outside of a body. We are all one body, and we just don't get it. It's a hell of a question about our origin.
Yeah, seriously, right? All right. We good going to DF1. Is there one in the chat?
Not currently, though I have encouraged people in the chat section to ask questions.
All right, cool. All right. Well, if we're waiting for one, this one's, have you thought about a TV career? No, not particularly. Have you ever thought about a TV career, Ray?
Only in possibly writing a movie. That would be it. I wouldn't want to be on the screen. I mean, even this is kind of weird. And you know, it's funny. The only reason I don't mind this is because there's no prep. I do no prep for this. I come in, I sit down. You all don't even know if I'm wearing pants, is what I'm saying. It's like, there's no concern whatsoever. I couldn't possibly stand going in somewhere where people are like dabbing me with shit and telling me to wear fuck that noise. I'm just not that guy. But I could definitely write a movie. I would love to do that. I got a shit ton of really trippy ideas I think would be awesome.
That would be awesome. Yeah, I think the social media stuff is enough for me, the podcast and whatnot. Yeah, no, I haven't really. I did when I was early on in social media, there was like this company that was doing these like shows but on social media, and they were trying to get like creators to be on it. And so I did some auditions for that but it didn't go anywhere. And I was happy for it. I saw some of the episodes after, and it was like corny teen drama sort of stuff. So yeah, the Ray's got to check something, but yeah, what else? I got reached out to, I don't know if anyone's heard of Love Island, but I got reached out to by the US version, which isn't the legit version. I think it's all like the UK is the big crazy one. Asking to audition for it. Some of my friends have said I should do like the Bachelorette or Bachelor, but I don't see myself doing that. I do think it would be very funny to go on there and talk about what we talk about on something like that. I was saying some of my friends have said I should try and do like the Bachelor or the Bachelorette or something, and I was just saying how fucking funny it would be if I came on there like bringing up these things in an incredibly superficial show like that. Like just how much fun that would be. So
you see, I think that should be a show. What I would love is to have a show where you have one aware person and a bunch of really egotistical people who are all trying to get a prize. But in order for them to get the prize, they have to let it go and be interesting enough to have a fucking conversation. So by the end of the show, they've evolved. And here's your prize for doing so.
That would be awesome. Oh God. Yeah. Anyway, you never know. Maybe we'll come up with a show like that at some point. But yeah. So anyway,
we do have another question that I missed entirely, unless you would like to go. Okay, you're good. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Hold on. Because it was PMAC. PMAC had a question and we passed her over. It's because we're inconsiderate bastards. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on trauma. I've heard a lot of spiritual people dismiss any healing journey in the name of the illusion of a past. Yeah, people do that when they're trying to, escape the unfortunate feelings that they're going through. I think that there are multiple layers to this. The healing journey to trauma is largely the acceptance that the trauma hasn't limited or defined you, that it's not actually about you. When you are finally healed from your trauma, typically it's because you've managed to turn that experience into something that's serving you, that is a tool now and indicative of your strength rather than ongoing pain. And so the process of going through that is difficult because we want to keep looking backwards. And it's not that we shouldn't, it's the problem that just like with the tree, when you're driving, you focus on the tree, you're going to hit the tree, right? The trauma that you went through in the past was bad enough the first time you went through it. Right? You went through it. And as a result, you have all of these ongoing memories because the trauma is really the response to what happened, not what happened. Right? And that's what we're getting over. So if you keep focusing on what happened, if you keep focusing on what happened without addressing why your immediate response was that, then your response is going to continue to be that, which means you're going to continue to reaffirm the trauma every time you look back. You're not actually dealing with it, you're reaffirming it because your response has not changed. Okay, so in order to change the response, you have to change what you lean on for a sense of value or strength or certainty or any of those things. You have to gain some strength and self-awareness. And so what happens is as you focus on the here and now, what you can do today, you see the triggers from the past. Those memories pop up on their own as you're faced with challenges. And that's your opportunity to go, I've been through worse, I can do this. Or I got through that, I can get through this, whatever it might be. And you're turning that original response into something else. And then as you start to look back through that process, your response, or rather your perception of what happened, will change. Your perception of what you got out of it will change because you are changing. And as you are changing, your response or your perception of the past is changing. And that's changing the effect that it has on you. But that change happens through focusing on now. It's not that you shouldn't look backwards, it's that you shouldn't deliberately look backwards thinking that's where the cure to this is. The problem isn't in the past. The problem is right now. Okay? Now is where we can work through the problem. It's going to bring up the past, but that's supposed to help us inform the now, which changes our response to that past until eventually we can let it go.
That was very well said. I honestly don't have a lot to add to that. I think that, yeah, perspective is the balance. It's not about discounting what has happened. It's just the meaning behind it, and the recognition that it's no one's saying that it didn't happen by any means, and it's just where your priority lies and where your focus lies will dictate the process of that being worked through and being worked out, and the idea that it's something that has to be changed in the past hinders the ability to look at it for what it is now and see the impacts of it here and now. So yeah, but yeah, I don't have my that was great answer.
I appreciate it. I've had a lot of time to work on that. And each time, it changes slightly, just because, again, you're always having, I guess that's it, like if you're willing to look at your trauma, if you really are over and over and over again, it really does change. It really does change. And I think that's it, is that, the older I get, the more I'm willing to just look at the experience of it. And because my judgment, my fear of it has diminished, I get a clearer and clearer look at it, and that's the beauty of it. You really can learn a lot that you wouldn't have learned otherwise. So take it as an angel rather than a demon, despite the fact that it might look demonic for a little while. It's just a thin veneer. It's often just reinforced by your fear. We have a great question here, and I'm looking forward to addressing this one. The seamlessness of humanity becomes rapidly apparent under psychoactive components. Does Salvinorin A connect you to each of yourselves throughout all of eternity? So this would be Salvia divinorum, or rather the psychoactive compound in Salvia divinorum, which I want to mention to everybody is just a member of the mint family. It just happens to be the only member of the mint family that has this one compound, Salvinorin A. Salvinorin A activates all of your brain's opiate receptors at the same time. So every receptor in your brain that is designed for an individual opiate on this planet, because don't you know, there are specific receptors in our brain for pretty much every drug on this planet, which is nice. All of them get activated with Salvinorin A. Now, does that immediately connect you to all of everyone that you're ever going to be, or everyone you are right now? No, but it's fucking intense. And the reason I say no is just because there's so much, and it's just a glimpse. Like, it's a glimpse. And I say that as somebody who's went deep on Salvinorin A. Like, there's still more. There's still more. And ultimately, I mean, that's the reason I look forward to dying.
Oh man, I think you've said that before with Salvia, that it but I think I forgot that. Like, do you know how, like, is there a number, or is it just like a lot of opiate receptors? Yeah, okay.
I'm sure you could find the number if you went looking, but
yeah,
in my experience, it's a lot.
Yeah, because and I don't necessarily have a lot to add to this because I haven't done it yet, but it's funny how almost anything that we do, like any psychedelic experience or experience that we have, we can attach to it and think like, oh, that's it. But most of the time, all it's doing is shaking you to recognize, like, this isn't as quote unquote real as you think. Like, your self-image, like where you think you fit into this reality, isn't what you think. That certainty that you hold on to may not be as certain as you think. So I really do see all of them, as much as people will point to, like, oh, mushrooms or weed or DMT or salvia, as like, oh, that shows you all of this, that opens up this dimension and this dimension. It's like, it's infinite. It's all of them, always, all the time, here now. And so it's not any one of them showing you any other thing. It's not, there's the machine elves, and there's these entities and these entities and these entities. It's like, it's just showing you more of infinity, which doesn't end. It's not like that, oh, that's it. It's just like, this isn't the extent of it. There's more. There's always more. So I think all of those compounds kind of just allow you to see that, and then come back to here now where you're at, wherever that is, whatever, fucking dimension experience you're having. And that's it. Like that's the priority, but also not as serious as you think.
It's really quite interesting because the only real difference between experiencing salvia and death is that you don't have to go through all the effort of growing a body. Like, so reality is that constant potential, right? The reason a salvia trip feels so long, despite lasting only a few minutes, is because you are so involved with the present moment. Like you've just fucking let go. Like you've let go. There's no more Andrew. There's no more body. Whatever you thought you were up until that moment's gone. It's gone. Like all you are now is sheer potential, in the same way as if you died. And then you come back, but you come back to this, right? Rather than being that, okay, with no sense of time whatsoever, okay, forever. And then occasionally forming into a fucking baby and then experiencing time as a body and then going back to that, because that's the only illusion. We're always in that place that we touch, that is sheer potential, where it seems like eternity is eternity. That is the place before the Big Bang. That's what we are, right? So we're just touching it for a little bit, but because we're still anchored in time, it goes by as a few minutes, right? But it's not. It certainly doesn't experience, or it doesn't feel that way, because that's the experience of being eternal, just with a little bit of time thrown in there.
Damn. Oh man. I'm both like fucking scared as fuck about.
That's a healthy mentality.
Yeah. That potential at some point one day trying, but also like so fucking curious and like, yeah. Cause as much as I can, like so often, and I think this is why when I took mushrooms the other day, it was so intense, was because I went into it before I took it. I'm at a spot now where I see things way more differently than I did taking, a couple years ago when I took 3 grams. Like I'm in that spot right now. This isn't ever what I think. And like I'm stepping through that with that. So like that experience, both, I know that there's still plenty I'm attached to here, but at the same time, I know that I am in a way, and so it's not as heavy necessarily. And I know there doesn't have to be the concern, but then stepping into a situation like that is just, it's going to be just, yeah, I'm just fucking curious and like afraid, but also there's like a kind of smirk with the fear of like, yeah, I'm scared. But I am, but I'm not, but I definitely am. Like, yeah, I don't know.
No, that's awesome. Well, and so this is where I'm going to take the time to throw in a little bit of, I guess, responsibility. Anybody who is interested or curious about Salvinorin A or salvia should go online and look for the Salvia Divinorum guide. It's wise to take this with a certain degree of seriousness. Like this isn't a party drug by any means. And anybody who managed to catch our episode last season with Amanita Dreamer, don't go walking around stairways, I guess is what I'm saying with this stuff. Like treat it for what it is. It will knock you on your ass. Okay. If you're not careful, you can hurt yourself just falling out of your chair. Okay. So this is one of those things that if you're going to do it, treat it with respect and have somebody sober with you. Okay. This is something that's important because when you come back, it's going to be disorienting. It's not like all of you comes back right away. Okay? It takes a little bit of time for you to start reinvesting in this story. Okay? So having somebody that you recognize, somebody who knows who you are, is a very comforting thing. Okay? So if you're going to do this, have an anchor. Okay, treat it with respect. Make sure you're somewhere comfortable. Okay, and advise your anchor to take the pipe out of your hand as soon as you're done with it. As soon as you exhale, take that pipe. Okay, because you're more likely going to either drop it if you don't put it down, or possibly just hold on to it the entire time. The point is just let them take the pipe, because you're gone as soon as you exhale. It's gone. Right. The last thing you're going to remember is, oh, it tastes terrible. And then you're gone. Right. And then you come back. So it's a hell of an experience, but treat it with respect, as with everything else. And I say this about mushrooms too. Mushrooms, you can, be kind of nonchalant, like, oh yeah, I did some mushrooms, yay. Or you can treat it as what it is, which is an accelerator for your awareness. Right. In which case there's shit that you can do with that other than just entertain yourself. Unless, of course, the shit that you can do with that is entertaining yourself because you're doing so in a non-egotistical way.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like every substance has the opportunity to both be super fucking deep or not very deep. And it depends on you. So it's not the thing. And that makes it very clear. It's not the thing itself. It's always you. It's always you having the impact on the thing as much as the thing is having the impact on you. And the more you maintain, how much of an impact it has on you, you're not going to have as much impact on it, or not that you're having an impact on it, but I think you know what I mean. And so, yeah, understanding that and understanding that same sort of responsibility and experience can be had with or without a substance. But yeah, if you think, and it's funny because someone commented on that gummy run video I did, like, oh, I feel like I'm the only person who's never tried weed. And then someone responded like, yeah, me too. And like, I don't feel like I'm missing anything. And it's like that right there. And this same person commented a few other things on the video, just about how, like, I don't think mind altering substances are necessary besides, some of the prescription medication. It's like, oh, Jesus fucking Christ. Like, come on now. It's like so bought in to just like control certainty, all of that stuff. And so, yeah, if you're someone who thinks there's nothing more to see or nothing that you're missing with these substances, it's only because you're holding on to so much fucking false certainty and so much of a solid idea of what this is. I know what this is. I'm not missing anything. This is just reality. This is just the way things are. It's like, holy shit. Yeah. Smoke this. Here, take this. And I don't mean salvia. I mean like a joint. But it's funny how people will say like, oh yeah, I'm not missing anything. It's like, you don't know. Well, it's hilarious for you to say, I know I'm not missing anything, while you're not doing the thing. There's no possible way for you to know what you're missing. And we're just afraid. And so we don't want to. But yeah, no, it's funny because like the more you're willing to step into that, like letting go of the false certainties, recognizing the rawness of the uncertainty, like the more you recognize how little you know, like the more you recognize how much more potential there is. And like we get to spots where like, oh yeah, I'm starting to get this. Oh no, I'm not. Oh, there's so much more. All right, I'm starting to get this. Oh no, I'm not. Until you get to a spot where you're like, all right, I'm gonna stop fucking saying that because I know that I'm not seeing all of it. And like there's no way for me to see all of it. And then even that is like, all right, well, I don't know that. But the more you see, the more you recognize that there is to see. And so it's not even about seeing, quote unquote, all of it, because that's not even something that's like even comes to mind anymore. It's just the continued exploration of what it even means, what you mean by it, so.
That was a hell of a question as well. Really loving the questions on this Q&A. Thank you. You would be up next.
All right. Do habits and routine count as identity?
That's a good question. I'm going to pass it to you to go first.
All right. So I think they are things that reinforce your identity. They're ways to hinder the process of questioning what you think you are. So I guess, first of all, habits and routine I think, okay, so how do they fit together? So the routine can become a sort of habit. Like a habit is something that we do without thinking about it because it provides us with some degree of false certainty and to continue going through it. And as they go on unquestioned, it's like they kind of, I guess both of them, habits and routine, kind of create a sort of staleness depending on how attached we get to them. And so as we continue through them without, mixing things up, shaking things up, wondering why we're so attached to a certain routine or a certain habit, as we continue through that without questioning it, it just reinforces everything that we think we are. As we question that, as we recognize, like, oh, why am I so attached to this routine? I'm attached to this routine because I appreciate the certainty that it gives me. If you're someone who's very much appreciating the certainty or the false certainty that it's giving you, there's going to be a lot of other things that are a component of that reinforced false certainty. So if you're someone who attaches very closely to routine and habit, there is almost a guarantee that you're going to attach to a conceptual idea of yourself that is being reinforced. And so it's not to say that they always directly reinforce themselves, but the mentality that causes someone to want to stick to a routine and habits is the same mentality that is reinforcing your idea of yourself. And so I think they go kind of part and parcel. And as you begin questioning yourself, you see certain habits coming up and you're like, oh, that is a habit. You're even able to just see that they are habits, because there's so many habits that we have that we wouldn't even recognize as being habits, or routines that we step into or continue going through that we don't even recognize as routines, because they're just so deeply tied to our idea of ourselves. And so as both begin getting questioned, as you start to recognize more and more of the habits that you've held on to, those are things that are a component of your idea of yourself. So they kind of begin to fall apart together, like in tandem, in a sense. So I think routines and habits, they are build, maintain, and can be a component of what you are. I'm someone who wakes up early. Like, waking up early is like that just being a statement that someone could make, like, oh, I'm a morning person, or oh, I'm a night owl. Like, those are routines that you've invested into that have now become a component of what you think you are, that have now become an identity. And so they certainly can count as identity. And I think they kind of go hand in hand with reinforcing each other, which means that as you begin to question them, the questioning of them, the peeling back of them, the falling apart of them also go hand in hand.
That's a good explanation. It's a good question too, just because it's important, I think, to recognize that routine and habit exist on a spectrum, that they're not in fact the same thing. That habit is a routine that's become almost unconscious, right? Whereas a routine, when you first developed it, was usually a result of a conscious effort, something that you were learning to do repeatedly as a strategy in order to deal with something, right? And so at that point, the routine itself, it isn't necessarily a bad thing, unless you lose awareness of it, because then it becomes something that you do rather than just something that you're doing. And what I mean is that you have a routine. Today, you woke up and you didn't do that routine. Are you going to think of yesterday and the routine you did then and judge yourself based on the fact you didn't do it today? That's the danger, because that judgment's based on identity. Now you're identifying with the routine itself. And that's the problem. And if you do that often enough, you continue to do the routine, you beat yourself up, you do all that, you continue to push yourself to do this routine, because otherwise, you might fail or look at yourself negatively. Now it becomes a habit. Now it becomes something that you have to do all the time, almost like you're compelled to do so. You just don't feel right unless you do. That's the danger. Familiarity is addictive, right? Whatever we are familiar with, we tend to identify with. And that's just how it happens over time, literally over time. It happens over time. In the moment, you can let it all go. But as soon as you start looking backwards or forwards, according to the routine that you formed, you are identifying and judging yourself.
Well said. Yeah, think we covered off on that pretty well. Do we have another in
Not
the
currently. What's
all right,
next?
cool. Okay, so I'll just, for ones that I don't know, I feel like we don't have to necessarily dig into too much. We can just give shorter responses. I mean, we'll see what you want to do with this one, but if you ever feel like you're not included in a conversation with your family, what would you do? I mean, so my immediate thing would would start wondering why I'm so concerned about not being included in a conversation, like how I'm perceiving myself, and wondering why I think that takes away from my value to be not included in something. So immediate for me is just the questioning of where my concern about a given situation goes into, and then an understanding that just because I think that might be the thing that's happening doesn't mean that that's actually what's happening, and wondering just why I'm thinking about myself so goddamn much, and that's where the concern's coming from. So that's the initial thing. It may not be where the conversation or the question was hoping to go, but yeah. And then after that, just not involving myself in the conversation.
Yeah, I'll take the path of the prick and just ask straight up, like, what are you bringing to the conversation? Like, what have you been bringing to the conversation? Have you been bringing a lot of need to the conversation when you're in the conversation? Is it about you and how you feel about things? Is it about your reactions and necessarily how people are focused on you? Because the question kind of indicates that that is the case. And if that's the case, then you're probably not spending a lot of time uplifting those around you. You're probably not spending a lot of time trying to help others in this conversation come to some degree of clarity, because it's all about participation and whether or not you're being included. Right. And so often the best way to be included in things is to stop needing to be. So that way, when you are actually in the conversation, you're doing more than just satisfying yourself. You're actually uplifting those around you. You're participating with their lives, with what they're going through, rather than just using that as an opportunity to think about yourself. And I don't mean to sound harsh in this whatsoever. I did it for a very long time. We all do, to some degree. But that is honestly often the case. Is that, we get the response we want from people when we stop wanting it. We get respect from people when we stop needing it. People like our company when we stop needing them to. And it's because we're actually being ourselves. Now, that doesn't mean that that's going to happen overnight. It might take a couple of conversations. It might take 100 conversations for you to finally get in the flow where you're not just thinking about yourself, but you're actually sitting there going, how's your day going? Lifting them up because you can. But then all of a sudden you'll notice that they want to talk to you all the time. And why? Because you're not adding weight. You are in fact helping them lift theirs. And that not because you need to, not because you want to be liked, but because you don't have any yourself. That's really it. Let go of the need for them to include you whatsoever. Include yourself. Be in your life. Okay. If they're not talking to you, be your own point of attention, because that's important. Live for you. Okay. It's like, I've often talked to people about this who are like, I just don't feel very interesting. Be more interested. The more interested you are, the more interesting you'll become.
Exactly. Well said. It's funny when we get so concerned about, oh, am I interesting? It's like everything turns internal, and then all our focus is like, oh, I got to be more interesting. How do I be more interesting? And it's like all of the things that cause you to be interesting are doing shit, looking out, like getting involved in stuff, and you're not getting involved in stuff because you don't think you're interesting. And it's just like this fucking vicious cycle into that. But yeah, PMAC said, you say shorter responses, but then always elaborate and go on fun tangents. Exactly. It's funny how we'll be like, oh yeah, this will be a shorter one. That's like, and then an insight hits you like halfway through that. You're like, oh shit. All right, we can keep going with that. But that's the beauty of, yeah, just being able to do whatever we want with this stuff. And yeah, I mean, we even decided to live stream like right before we started. We usually never live stream these episodes. So like, yeah, it's adds so much more to it.
Well, and I think it's important to show what, I mean, most of our viewers know this just from being in a group with us, but not everybody has been in a group with us. We don't plan any of this shit. Like, this is exactly how an episode would go, except that we wouldn't be live. We'd just be doing this. And then the episode would finish and we'd go on our way. So we just figured we'd do this live since it's a Q&A, or rather a Q episode, and just put it on display. Like, we really are just showing you what we are, right? There's no preparation, because it's not about the insight. It's about where we are, right? And what comes from that. And that's really why this has been a lot of fun. I love these Q&A episodes. I'm glad we're doing this one live. What's your next one?
All right. PMAC, I appreciate this question. How can you ever be an expert or a master if everything is uncertain and ever changing? Fantastic question. You wanna start this one?
I would say that is the sign of a master, is the acceptance that everything's uncertain and ever changing, because that's where you are spending the most attention, which is the sign of a master.
Boom. Yeah, I mean, that's just it, is that our ideas of a master knowing all about something. Like, as soon as someone thinks of themselves as a master, they fucking die, basically. They die to reality. Like, they're no longer experiencing it because they've settled upon a spot and they're like, oh, I get this now. Look at me. And now it's starting to mean something about them. It goes from, as they're learning, it's all outward, external, like learning more, deriving more from reality. And then it's like, oh, that makes me a master. And it's like, boom, and it like circles in. Now it's all about me and how do I validate myself? Oh, I have to be seen in this way. That's why, in the Deep End Teal Swan documentary, like the guy asks, hey, have you ever wondered if maybe you don't know as much as you think? Or he asked something like that. And she was like, oh, how dare you? Do you think the fastest man on earth ever gets asked if he's really the fastest man? It's like, holy fuck, that is an insane response to that question. That is fucking insane to say something like that. And it's so clear, like she sees herself as a master, as the, not even a master, fucking like the master, the epitome. And it's just like straight up epitome of ego. That's what it is. Like, so lost in your idea of yourself, and thinking that you're there is and thinking that it means something about you is literally like one of the like extremes of ego. And so, yeah, considering yourself a master and expert is an extreme of ego, when it's a conceptual idea of you knowing something and therefore meaning something about you. And it shifts everything from that continued exploration to this means something about me. And so therefore, if anyone questions anything that I know, then I have to defend it. I have to validate. And so you spend the rest of your life like you're building all of these things, and then you get to a spot where you seem comfortable, and then you go inside and live in it, and you're just out there like defending everything that you build because you think it means something about you, and that's where you think all your value is derived from. So yeah, no, I mean, the recognition itself is, as Ray said, like being a master, but in terms of that, like, be very, very wary of anyone who considers themselves a master or even a teacher.
The master is a lifelong student. Absolutely. We got kind of a funny question here. What's my favorite movie idea? Honestly, I've got a lot. A lot of them are epic in scope and probably involve like 6 or 7 chapters or various different movies for sure. But it's something along the lines of what's actually happening, except of course with slightly more narrative in terms of the decisions that we're making, the choices that we're having, the conversations that are happening here on Dualistic Unity, for example, are all indicative of a certain mindset. Well, what if the system's actually watching for that specific mindset? Not the system as a whole, but only a certain subset within that system. Let's say the Illuminati. And what they're doing is looking for somebody who is becoming rapidly aware that they are everything. And so one day, as you're watching, say, Dualistic Unity right now, sitting at your computer watching this live stream, someone knocks on your door. And it just happens to be you. And you don't know it yet, but they know from all the signs that that is the case. And they want to help. And they introduce you to this large storyline that's happening behind the scenes about the rise of awareness and the adversary that we're all collectively identifying with. And this is just like the first half of the first book.
Damn, yo. I want to watch that movie now. Oh, holy shit. Yeah, that would be epic. So the person, like, is it you, like your idea of yourself, like in terms of in the movie, would it be the actor playing the person meeting, or
We see this is it. How would this evolve? Because this this character is ultimately going to have the recognition of being all characters. And what's fun is as the story progresses, other characters in different geographies entirely start to have the exact same insight. So all of a sudden now the people who were tracking this one person that you thought was so important are finding the same indications all over the fucking world as something is starting to happen simultaneously as this person wakes up, but all these other people are waking up because they're all the same person waking up. And so they're watching the awareness of what is come into being in the collective, thinking that it's all about one person making the same Jesus mistake, and then having it contradicted by the rise of everyone coming to this awareness at the same time. And of course, there's all kinds of political dispute and everything else would be happening in the background, but yeah, it's a fun story.
damn, that's awesome. So then now I'm just curious about this. This because I don't even know if it's worth.
We're just going to have to write the script.
Yeah, I know. Because yeah, so
after
now
the book, after the book. But
yeah.
And I just want to mention to everybody that we're currently writing a book. We're working on it right now. For anybody who is a tier 3 supporter on Patreon, we are going to be sharing the updates as that continues to move along. But obviously, as I said earlier, lofty ambitions. There's no fucking ceiling. I'd love to be involved in the movie. I would love to be involved with writing because there's so much in terms of the epicness of this. And that's the thing, is that it's not because, I'm creative or any of that. It's just I don't have any walls. And so there's nothing but creativity.
Yeah, for sure. Now there's a lot to be done. For
Watch
sure.
this.
A lot of potential.
Someone's going to try and rip off the idea and they're totally going to shit the bed.
All right.
Blaming you, Warner Brothers.
Oh man. All right. We
Next question.
Up for another.
I just wanted to say thanks for that one, by the way. That was fun.
Yes, that was awesome. Okay. Why do you think people refuse to look at quote unquote God outside of their own beliefs / thoughts?
Responsibility.
Yeah, pretty much it. Like, yeah, and fear, concern, unwillingness to question what they hold on to as truth. Like, we cling to our certainties, thinking that if that domino falls of that being wrong, then everything else is back on the table. And so it's like we have this massive load of shit that we're just like keeping up, and we're afraid of one little part breaking open, so we keep patching it up and it keeps getting bigger, and as opposed to just letting it go and dealing with the repercussions of that. We're just like, no, there's definitely a God looking over us, and this is all part of his plan, and that's it. And it is just responsibility. We just want to keep kicking the can down the road is really what it comes down to.
And I've thought about that for years. Like, I've thought about it. Like, I don't say that with any degree of nonchalant attitude. I'm not being facetious. That really is it. We just don't want it to be us. At the end of the day, we just don't want it to be us. And so we don't want to actually do the work on our own to figure out what the fuck this is. Right. So we just keep looking around for people who have the right answer. Admittedly, half the people listening to this are probably doing the same fucking thing. We don't have it. We don't have the answer. You're the answer. And that's the whole point. There's no conceptual answer. Okay. It's just ongoing process. That's all it is. And once you embrace it and get into it, that's where your freedom is at the end of the day. And it's frustrating for the simple fact that I would love for there to be a simple answer. that would get this across. I would love it to be that easy, but it's not, because it's that much. Because it's that much. And when we're talking about God, when we're talking about the fact that just even trying to imagine the fact that both of my eyeballs, for example, are looking at two different things from the same mind. It's difficult to wrap your mind around. So imagine 1 billion, 7 billion, 8 billion eyeballs all revolving from the same mind. Immediately our brain just goes, what? And we give up. And that's it. We just give up. We're just like, that's a lot. What's on TV? Right? And that's the reason we're just like, well, I'll turn to religion. I'll turn to Christianity. I'll turn to Islam. I'll turn to Buddhism. I'll turn to any structure that makes it so I don't have to think about whatever the fuck Ray just said.
Exactly. It really does just play out like that. A lot to ponder, a lot to question. It's a little too much. I'm gonna go back to this now. I'm gonna go back to this. They make me feel better. And it's funny. Like I had someone who, oh, it's crazy to see. I know you've seen lots of this, but people who are in a spot of questioning and wondering, and then they go through an experience. This person in particular smoked weed, and they were just, that uncertainty, that rawness of that uncertainty was shown to them, and now they fucking ran back to believing in God, and they're all about like, oh, God is it's got to be God, and they unfollowed me on social media, and it was someone who was like creator, who we had gone back and forth in the past, and yeah, like they just ran back to just something that created a cessation of the discomfort, and and now it's like, they share stuff that's all about them building themselves. They just got a nice new Mercedes car, and like, see,
praise Jesus,
too can be possible if you just do what I do. It's like, oh yeah, it's so fucking interesting.
Well, when I think what would Jesus do, I immediately think Mercedes.
Exactly. But it's funny because like I don't even know if they're religious. They just like ran back to, oh, there is he, there is God, there is the Almighty, and looking down on me. And it's so fucking pathetic, honestly.
I'm terrified, man. That's all it is, really. It's just like, God, there's got to be, because otherwise it's just uncertainty. It's funny. People would actually cling to a fiction rather than just accept they don't fucking know. Right? Like, that's really all it is. It's just like, this feels really uncomfortable. Someone tell me what to think. And somebody is always willing to do that for their own reasons. They're always willing to do that for their own reasons, which is why, again, I like Marie's idea of alternative schooling for younger kids, because it's not about teaching them what to think. It's about giving them opportunities to figure out how to think. Right? It's about giving them opportunities to show us what intelligence is, rather than us coming from confusion trying to dictate it to them. Changes the perspective, but this means that we have to wake the fuck up and recognize that we're full of shit.
Exactly. All right. It looks like we have a question in the chat.
Is there a point where your ego no longer is a recurring wall that distances you from your awareness? I guess it comes down to the fact that your ego is not actually a wall. It's your overcommitment to it as truth that more or less creates the wall moment to moment to moment. Because otherwise it's just, again, the perception of division. Right? But once you take that perception as truth, it becomes a self-concept. That's where things get tricky. But if you can, live in the gap before that comes into being, then yeah, your ego doesn't stop you from accessing your awareness at all.
Yeah, it's like, because you can perceive a division without the experience meaning something about a fiction of you, right? And so there can be that perception of division with which your ego allows for, because that's all it is just perception of division. It's just the degree to which you take it as being the truth of what you are. And so, yeah, it's like we're asking the wrong questions about it, thinking that the ego is something to be overcome. Like the ego is something to be destroyed or like obliterated, or let me take this ego and attach a bomb to it and fucking blow that fucker up. It's like, okay, and then what? And then you're still you here now. So it's not the destruction of it, it's the shifting of how you see it. It's the shifting of how attached and invested in that dictating your value you are. So it's not a obliteration of it at all, because like you're still you here now. Say you obliterate your ego, you have an ego death. And then you attach to the story of having an ego death and thinking that it means something about you, and it makes you feel better than other people because you had an ego death, and that's the most egotistical thing you can ever do, which is funny how that's able to come around in that way. So like if you think of that experience of obliterating your ego, like what comes next? Well, you're still you here now. And if you're maintaining a idea that your value is derived from anything that happens, you're still maintaining a limited perception of yourself. And so you can go through the experience without the weight of how much attachment goes into perceiving yourself as something that's inherently separate from anything else. And like if you're going through an experience like this experience right now that we're having, like if you can go through this without thinking that anything that is said or anything means anything about you, and there isn't that concern, like you're still interacting with reality and yourself, but there isn't the concern. And that's arguably the equivalent of not maintaining or attaching to your ego, but it's not because you got rid of it, you just stopped paying it quite so much attention. And in that, there is the state of freedom, that flow state, that ability to just be so involved in the situation and understanding that there isn't a possible way for it to mean anything about you with certainty. Like with fact, it's way easier to just continue stepping through and finding out more and more of what's possible.
Another good question. That was awesome. I'm really enjoying this episode. I'm glad we decided to live stream this. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, we got a few more here. How can I avoid being shy? I am shy of doing anything. I'll start this one off. I think, so I think even in the statement, I think in our society, especially, we lean towards extroverted people and that experience of being more outgoing as being better than not being as outgoing. Like shy is equated to this negative thing. And so as we experience certain things, as we feel like, oh, I'm being shy, that's something I shouldn't be, I should be something else, and all these shoulds and shouldn'ts come into play, how does that impact your experience? That causes you to feel stressed. You feel like I'm doing something that is wrong. I'm doing something that is inherently wrong. I should be doing something else. And so you clench and you're like, how do I figure this out? How do I solve this problem? This is definitely a problem because I definitely shouldn't be going through this. And so now you're all tense, and that is now your experience. But if you could start things off with the recognition that there's nothing wrong with being shy. Shy isn't this objectively wrong, bad experience. How does that impact your experience here now? You remain relaxed. And in that spot, you're more free to wander about, more free to experience things. It really is our idea that whatever we're going through or experiencing or the way that we're acting is wrong, that causes the stress and the tension that then reinforces our inability to move about. And it like reinforce the stress and the tension, reinforce the story and like deepen us into what we already believe to be true about ourselves. So as we attach to the story of I'm a shy person. I'm a shy person, and therefore I'm doing something wrong. I am become more of a shy person and do more wrong, and then do more shy things and do more wrong. And there's no space to like fucking drop that shit and just step into a situation that allows us to see ourselves a little bit differently. So as that tension and stress is alleviated through letting go of the idea that there's fucking anything wrong whatsoever with being shy, you have you're in a more relaxed spot and have some space to wander about, to step into a situation where usually you would avoid it because you think that you're shy, and find out what's possible. And you'll realize like, oh, I had this whole narrative of this situation. I stepped into it. I had a conversation with someone. They actually expressed to me that they were nervous about going into this situation. And then we just talked, and then it was like, oh my gosh. And then that's chipping away at the story. So then you're not telling yourself so much because there's more what's the word? There's more experiences, what's like things that you do that reinforce something to yourself. I guess experience. There's more experiences showing you that you're not so shy of a person. And so as you go through that, but until you let go of the idea that there's something wrong with being shy, there isn't the ability to step into situations that question, like spit in the face of the narrative that you're telling yourself. But, clinging to the certainty of I'm this and this is wrong and this is definitely this way and this definitely means this about me, just like kind of implodes in itself. And so it all starts with letting go of the idea that there's something wrong with what you're doing or how you think you are, that'll gives you the space to step into situations that may be able to shift that narrative. But as long as you keep reinforcing it, you're not going to have the space to step through it.
Yeah, that's a big part of it, right? It's just recognizing that, yeah, you're experiencing being shy. Just don't add to it by thinking that you shouldn't be, right? I guess that's it. Like, we tend to think, oh, well, I'm shy. I don't feel like speaking up. That person's talking a lot. Therefore, they're not afraid. Tell you right now, another way of dealing with that insecurity is not just not talking much, but talking too much. So you might actually be making assumptions about other people, thinking that they're not afraid just because they're not acting the way that you do. There's a lot of different ways to try and get over insecurity. There's a lot of different ways to try and distract yourself. And the point is that whatever your life is, whatever the choices that were that led you up until here, whatever the influences are that you've experienced have led you to feeling shy in this moment. In the same way that your experiences lead you to being hungry before a meal. You don't resist the hunger and judge yourself for not eating sooner, right? So why resist being shy and judge yourself for experiencing it when it's going to take you to the next lesson that is ultimately going to help you feel more fulfilled? You got to go through it. That's the whole point, right? Because it's part of who you are. If you avoid it and judge yourself for it, you're just going to get stuck there, right? So you may as well just take it as the next lesson, eat that meal, and enjoy the benefits.
Exactly. All right. Cool. We got anything in the chat? I didn't see anything. Okay, cool.
I think we are slowly winding down to the end of our questions here.
Yes. All right. I'm gonna skip. Yeah, some of these are just ridiculous. So we're not even gonna. All right. Here's an interesting one. I started developing paranoia from weed. Also, my mom has schizophrenia. Doctors told me if I continue smoking, it's very likely I'll also get schizophrenia. Do you think that's accurate?
I think, as with all mental health, it comes down to awareness and responsibility, as well as overindulgence or overuse. I mean, the question is, why are you smoking weed? If you're smoking weed as an escape from your life, then ultimately you're not doing your mental health any benefits either, because irresponsibility is going to make it even harder to be sensitive to your emotional swings or the things that you're thinking. And so you're going to descend further and further into what people might call schizophrenia down the road, right? And so I think it just comes down to, like with everything, if it's purely habitual and made to make you feel better, avoid it. give yourself the time to actually gain some strength and find your peace within yourself. And when you're okay, then it's okay to do these things, but not if it's an escape. I think that's the biggest danger, because there you're reinforcing a strategy that you're using for the rest of your thoughts that will lead you to a consequence down the road, I think, is the only real thing. So as with everything, it's not necessarily the substance as the mentality that it's coming from, or the mentality that's using that substance, why, how often, for what purpose, and ultimately where you think that's going. But I wouldn't say that. See, that's the thing, like with all quote unquote professionals, there's always gray area. Anybody who's like, no, it's absolutely going to happen that way, you don't have to trust that, because it comes down to you. You have far more power over your life than any professional will ever admit, because that would basically take away from how much of a professional they are.
Well said. Yeah. I'm not going to add anything to that, so we can keep getting through questions. And I think you covered that very well.
Thanks.
Yes. You're welcome. Had that ego. I'm just kidding.
Someone's gotta.
Yeah, right. Fuck. Someone sent like a picture response. I don't even know if I'm gonna. Oh, it could actually be interesting. All right, I haven't fully read this, and it's fucking tiny text. But if you're always at the end of the path and there's no need to progress further along it or be anywhere other than you already are, how do you justify goal setting and wanting to get further along a certain endeavor, or planning to be somewhere or have something in life, saving money, home ownership, wife and kids? Do you want to start?
So I'm not actually present, but how am I supposed to be present and still get all of the things that I want because I'm not present?
Pretty much. We've answered this question a number of times. Just because you have a perception of where you think you are doesn't change the fact that you're at the quote unquote end of the path. And when you save money, it's comes down to you and your balance. You can save, you make a certain amount of money, you could save all of it and live based on very, very little, or you could save none of it and live like you have a bunch of money. Like, yeah, they're all on the table, and it depends on you, but it doesn't change the fact that you're here now and you're never anywhere else. Like, that's the reality of what you are. So
See, I always find this kind of funny, because we are under the impression that the only way we're going to get to a house is if we deliberately focus on making enough money to get that house, right? Fact is that if you are making enough money to provide for all your needs, and you're working on yourself, that feeling of lack, so that way you have even less needs, then you're going to have excess money. And if excess money piles up over time, it ends up being what we would call savings. And then you can take those resources and do something with them without ever having to hold on to the idea of having to get that house that whole fucking time. See what I'm saying? Like, your life takes the priority. And then you have resources as a result of the time and attention you've put into the moment that you've been experiencing. This is also going to help with your job. Also going to help with how much money you make. It's also going to help with all of the opportunities that you find, and all of the possibly the houses that you look at in the future. Like, all of this is going to come to bear in your life, but it's the attention that matters. The attention on the here and now. Everything comes from that. Aside from that, it's just accumulated energy, right? The more attention you spend on now, the more potential you are accumulating.
well said. Yeah, it all stems from that, and it's almost like a process that works itself out through paying attention to where you're at. As the needs drop, the potential increases, the freedom increases, and then it's simultaneously like you're at a spot where something could happen that you once wanted and you no longer even want it. And so we're ever changing, and unless we're attached to something meaning so much about us that we feel like unless we have that, we're worthless, then we're just gonna exist in that spot, reinforcing that false belief for our whole life. And there's no thing that you could ever possibly get that's going to change that. So yeah,
I like to focus on developing the skill that I can carry with me in every moment, which is being present.
exactly. It's funny. All right. We got one more from the same person. This one can be quick despite it having a lot to it, but it's another one of those trying to whatever.
Oh, I love these.
Yeah, you say you are not what you ever think, but then say you are God. You are the here and now. You are the universe. You are everybody and everything. It's only you. Isn't it contradictory? Isn't the possibility of a sky daddy or any possibility of what we are just as possible as the next?
So I just want to point out that all of the words that you use to describe what we are all words that indicate something limitless. That we're God, we're the universe, we're what is. These are all things that are describing a lack of border. And the fact that you're settling on one, and you're like, oh, you're saying we're God, that's not our problem at the end of the day. You're the one settling on the idea of God. But God, the word, the concept behind the word is the non-conceptual, the beyond your understanding, the thing that cannot be pinned down to any one thing. And so we're using descriptions that at least are communicating the limitlessness of what we are, as opposed to, the Christian God who's constantly fighting Satan and has a real issue with, I don't know, yoga.
Exactly. And yeah, with that last part, isn't the possibility of a sky daddy or any possibility of what we are just as possible as the next. So you can go on forever saying maybe this, maybe that, maybe this, maybe that, maybe this, maybe that. But even just in that statement, even just in the questions, you are settling upon a fuckload of assumptions about what you think you are. Like the only thing you can confirm is that you're here now. Everything beyond that is based on assumption. And so we're coming to these spots of like, oh, there could be a sky daddy. There could be anything. And if that's where our focus is, then any potential is on the table, and we're just picking one, being like, that one makes me feel good. And it's based off of jack all fucking shit. And the only thing you can say with certainty is that you're here now. And so there's a willingness to step through that and dig into that we avoid. The only thing we can say with certainty, we avoid that by, well, maybe this. Well, yeah, that, the present moment, being here now, that's all great and everything. But like, maybe there's a guy with a beard sitting in the sky looking at us and judging us. It's like we're avoiding the only the only real thing that we can actually discuss by pointing at all the other bullshit. It's like, yeah, anything could be. And it could look like a fucking giraffe looking down on us too. It's like, well, that's ridiculous. You think there's a dude sitting up there watching us, judging us, and you think it looks like a person. Like, that's one of the craziest things I've ever heard in my life. And yet that's what we're doing collectively. So through even just saying, oh, well, anything could be possible, you're not looking at the only thing that is real. And there is a lot there, and we just keep trying to avoid it by pointing at everything else that could be. Yeah, anything could be, but what is?
But that's the difference between blind faith and a concept, as opposed to the recognition that you don't know, which is actual faith, right? Because they'll make the argument for Sky Daddy, but then you'll be like, okay, where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? And they'll be like, you just have to ask Jesus to show himself to you. It's like, I got you one better. God, if you're there, strike me dead right fucking now. Oh, and they'll be like, well, he's showing mercy, and that's the whole thing, is that it just comes down to a fairy tale that they're telling themselves that has no credibility in reality. It has no evidence whatsoever. At best, it's kind of anecdotal, and it's always according to their own biases and what they want to see. It's the same thing as that blue fucking feather thing. I'm manifesting a blue feather. Fuck. It just, at the end of the day, it comes down to what is real, what is here. Okay. And what we're talking about is not something that you need to believe. We're not asking you to take in anything at faith. What we're saying is that everything is questionable. Well, if that's possible, then anything can be possible. That's not what we're saying. We're saying everything is questionable, and what remains is what is. Right? What you're saying is that there's a giraffe in the sky with a scroll of good and bad things to do. And when I ask you, where's the giraffe? You're like, it's up there. that seems questionable. And for you to deny that it's questionable makes me wonder about you. And that's the whole thing. But that's it. There's a big difference between saying you're God, you're everything that is, versus there's a God. Because the difference is belief versus uncertainty. Your God is just a way of saying you're all that is. And from your perspective, that's all you know.
Exactly. Oh, I'm thinking of some triggering video ideas in regards to God. Just a video like that. Like, God, if you're real and you're not a little pussy ass bitch, strike me down, spite me. Just say like heinous things, like call God names, and just see. Oh God, his
Wait till
comments
you've
would run
left Texas.
wild. Yeah, true. I was thinking of doing that like out in this parking lot here outside my building. Someone's gonna like pull a gun out of their window. Be like, you can't say that. Like, oh boy. It's funny. But anyway,
Hey
yeah.
man, I mean, this is the thing. Like there was a guy on TikTok, I loved this. Basically, he called out the witches of TikTok. He's like, go ahead, curse me. I dare you. Do it. So he got a lot of hate and nothing happened, obviously. And they're just like, well, obviously he's a warlock. He's using spells to counter our intentions. It's like, holy shit. Like it was really funny. But yeah, I firmly encourage you to do it. Absolutely. Because I mean, sure, you're probably going to get flagged for hate speech, but it's funny.
Oh, I can just see how angry people would get just like from calling God names as if and that's where it comes from, like them defending this thing that's supposed to be all knowing and all powerful. It's like, why the fuck do you think it has to get defended by you? Like that seems super limited and insecure and like, oh, so sad. So sad that little bitch boy sitting up there has to get defended by you. I don't know. Like I'm feeling maybe at some point if I'm real riled up, I'll start doing that. But yeah, I don't know. We'll sit on it for a bit.
We got 10 days in Colorado coming up.
That's true. That is very true. They won't kill me for that there.
No, not with a group of DU people around you. I mean, it's too many witnesses, right?
Exactly.
We got a quick question here. How do you guys define the ego? That's a great question. To me, again, the ego is not a thing so much as a strategy or habit, the habit of identifying with the divisive experience that you're having, because the division is basically the root of all of your experience, the perception of division. When you overcommit to that as truth, you create a self-image or a self-concept that you think is you, which is obviously more divided from what actually is, and that is your ego. And if you take it too seriously, it gets all fucked up. But aside from that, it's just a fun tool.
Exactly. And we actually, in season 5, episode 1, directly answered that. And we have a YouTube video that is specifically that. It's a couple minutes. Yeah, if you find our YouTube, or if you're watching from YouTube, it's there. I think it's straight up called "What is the Ego?" From within the last couple of weeks, so it's pretty recent. But yeah, it's funny. Even like as you were saying that, I was thinking if you started identifying, which people do, like they identify with a team, with a belief, with a certain thing, but like, and just how much fucking how difficult it would be. Like imagine you started identifying not just with you, but with your whole family. Like you have, siblings, parents, like how much more difficult would your experience be if you started identifying as that? Because all of a sudden you have to be watching over all of that and like how everyone's perceiving that and how everyone's acting within the family. And like, there's so much stress that would go with that. There's so much desire for control and certainty that isn't a possibility. You can't get there, but we try. And that, when you point it out like that, like identifying with a group, or be it a small group or a big group, and thinking that how they act means something about you, like it so obviously would just fuck your experience so hard. Like it would be diminish your experience to such a degree that you would give that up pretty quick. And yet we do that for ourselves. We maintain an idea that we have to defend and we have to, act in a certain way. So we're seen in a certain way. And that's equally as ridiculous as opposed to just dropping that and being like, well, yeah, I don't know how it's going to be perceived. There's no way for me to control how it's perceived. So I might as well just keep stepping through things in that uncertainty and keep expressing myself how I want to. Because it's absurd to do otherwise. It is actually absurd to do otherwise, to maintain a concern about how you're being perceived is a ridiculous thing to do. That's just commonplace.
So funny because you're talking about how identifying with your family, and that was our history. That's why we had clan wars, right? Is that we would identify with our family name. I mean, shit, that's Romeo and Juliet, man. Like the Montagues and the Capulets. That was exactly it. They had expectations of what you were supposed to do or how you're supposed to behave as a member of that family. And it certainly wasn't dealing with that other family, right? And that's where all the pressure came. It's because they identified as the family rather than just being self-responsible and using their own brains. And this is the problem with mob rule, right? And the more of us are trying to think collectively as a group, the dumber we get, right? And so, I mean, it really just comes down to being an individual that is solely responsible and aware, and then finding a way to align with other responsible individuals. That's really all it is. But the more we identify with the group, the dumber we get.
Oh, I had an insight about that, identifying with groups the other day. Just like it was something about that herd mentality, and how there's like an overarching attachment to a certain thing, and like we'll pass off our own thoughts and opinions just to fit in, and then we just mold ourselves to being involved in that as opposed to thinking for ourselves. And there is more to it, but I'm not even going to try and remember. And yeah, it's just like, oh man, that attachment to things cuts off so much of our potential to fucking live and exist. Yeah.
It reminds me of a quote from one of the founding fathers of the US, that those who would trade security or would trade freedom for security deserve neither.
Wow. They recognized something there. That's for sure. Holy shit, how quick we just discount that. Don't even look at it.
Because in our mentality, we can't recognize it, right? Like that's the thing. Like when we hear that, we're like, oh, freedom, right to bear arms, Bill of Rights. That's not freedom. That's not freedom. Freedom is you. Here, now, that's your freedom. That's why, those who are not willing to defend their rights have none. This is a maxim in law. This is actually something the law is based on. If you're not willing to defend your rights, you don't have any. Okay, so we all take the Bill of Rights. We're like, yes, these are guaranteed by God. No, they're guaranteed by the people who at one point took over everything under the threat of violence. And then they made a document to shut you up.
Exactly. Oh, goodness. Madness. All right. I got one more reasonable question. A lot of silly ones. Just real quick
to the reasonable one then.
Yeah. You're not going to answer this, but let's try. Iceland or Finland? I've never been to either. I'd like to go to both at some point. And that's where I'll leave that. But the more reasonable thoughts on not pursuing a corporate job and just winging it, unconventional paths, etc. So yeah, the last part isn't a question, but it's just, I think, addition to that.
All yours. This is your journey more recently than mine.
Yeah. I think that it's all on the table. I think a lot of times in the spiritual community, there's like this demonization of corporate jobs, of 9 to 5s. And it's like, oh, it's sucking the life out of me. It's like, because you're maintaining an idea of what you should or shouldn't be doing. You're maintaining an idea of what corporations do and like you're cutting off all of the potential impact that you could have through letting go of your idea of the right or the wrong way to live, through your idea of, oh, corporations are so fucked up, buying into that. Oh, 9 to 5, can't do that. That's I'm just wasting my life away. I'm being a slave to the man, slave to the system. And it's like, yeah, you can maintain that narrative all you want, or you can recognize that you're always having impact. You're always having influence. So whether you're doing a 9 to 5 job or a non 9 to 5 job, whatever you're doing, the more attention you pay it without concern about what it means about you, without concern about where you're going or what it's adding to you, the more involved in the situation you can be, the more impact you can have. And you can have impact on anything and everything, everywhere, all the time, on anyone. So if you're in a corporate job, there's a lot of people who are having a lot of impacts on that. People who are willing to question and shift things, and they have, say, a managerial role in a corporate job, and they are having an experience with the people that they're working with, under, above, like managing, and they can have a massive impact on them. But if you're caught in, oh, this isn't something I should be doing, I should be doing something else, that's going to hinder your ability to have that impact, because, you know, in that full pie chart of your attention, as some of the attention is being paid towards thinking that you shouldn't be doing the thing that you're doing, that is attention taken from the impact that you can have on the situation. And so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm going to keep this. We've talked about this a number of times with 9 to 5s and differences, and I could get into like pros and cons and whatnot, but we've been talking for a while. We could easily do like 10-hour Q&A episodes. But yeah, it comes down to letting go of the idea that there's a right or a wrong way to live, and working with what you have, giving the fullness of your attention to the experience that you're having, and letting things play out. And there's going to get to a spot usually where you realize that it's time for a shift, time for a change, and there's not a right or a wrong time to do that either. It's just making it. And the more attention you're paying to the reality of the situation, the more sensitivity and the more alignment you're going to have with reality. And that's going to accentuate your sensitivity. And then you're still not going to make the right decision, because there is no right decision, but you're going to come closer to it the more sensitive you are to the reality of what's actually happening, as opposed to your perception and opinion of what you think should be happening.
Nice. There is no right answer. Just carry on. That's pretty much it. This has been a blast. Such a good episode. We haven't done one of these in a long time, so it was definitely a lot of fun. I'm going to be in Colorado next week, so anybody who is there at the mini retreat or the mini retreat, we can do a live Q&A, just shooting the shit, as it were. This has been a fun episode, a Q episode. Absolutely. I think that's what I'm going to entitle it, Q and not so much A, or something along those lines. But thanks everyone who could ask the questions and participate today. It really did mean a lot to us, as always, and we look forward to doing this again with you. I'll pass it over to Andrew.
Absolutely. This has been a blast. I appreciate everyone who tuned in on Twitch, asked some great questions, everyone on Instagram that asked all the questions. And yeah, we'll keep incorporating these as we go. And if you have other questions that we didn't answer, free trial on Patreon, hop into a group, ask us there. That's the most direct way to ask us anything. It's hopping on there. So again, appreciate everyone, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye, everyone.